Christie's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the top story, a jury in New York has tonight reached its verdict on the Donald Trump civil rape trial, concluding he did not rape magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s. However, the court did find that he sexually abused and defamed her. The 79-year-old former columnist has been awarded $5 million in damages. Trump has called the verdict a disgrace, adding he will appeal. During the 7-day trial in Manhattan's federal court, jurors were told Mr. Trump raped her in a dressing room more than 2 decades ago. Her defamation claim concerns a post he made on his Trump Truth social website in 2022, calling her allegations a hoax and a lie. Republican candidate for Arizona, Governor Carrie Lake, told GB News earlier on this evening the trial was part of a witch hunt against the former president.
He's getting found guilty by a jury in New York, one of the most liberal cities in the world, frankly, in the country for sure. And we've seen just a constant witch hunt of this man. I think they're trying to set things up going into the election where he looks so damaged that they try to convince even a few voters here and a few voters there that they're just exhausted with him and they need to move on. And I don't believe that the people will move on from President Trump that easily.
Well, in news here at home, the Information Commissioner's office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over the disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wire in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also said it had identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway, with findings and recommendations due to be published in the autumn. Now, the Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the coronation after some criticism for the arrest of 6 protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrests as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officers' actions. The force confirmed the individuals faced no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. The Prime Minister today said he supports people's right to protest, but that the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. Pharmacists will be able to give prescription medicine without a GP sign-off in the latest government plans to ease the pressure on doctors. Under the measures, patients will be able to get treatments for 7 common conditions, including a sore throat and ear infections, without seeing a doctor. It's hoped the new guidelines, which will come into place this winter, will free up about 15 million appointments at surgeries over the next 2 years. Rishi Sunak says the measures will also help cut waiting times for those seeking medical help. Excuse me, I think I need a doctor myself. Now, a marine barge which will be used to house migrants has arrived in UK waters. It's called the Bibby Stockholm. It's docked in Falmouth this morning to be refurbished ahead of its use as a housing centre. The 3-storey barge will be used for at least 18 months and can hold up to 500 people as they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. It's part of a government scheme to move asylum seekers away from costly hotel accommodation. Well, those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News. Time now for Headliners.
Hello, welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me to go through Wednesday's newspapers headliner royalty lineup, Leo Kearse and his non-sweating brother, Josh Howie. You do look as if you've been dressed for a coronation there.
I thought you were going to say I look like I've been sweating.
No, you absolutely look regal.
All right,
magnificent. Well, we both seem to look on quite summery, haven't we?
And happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind of you. They've given me the special squeaky chair to celebrate my birthday, like some sort of Leonard Rossiter-themed episode. Anyway, we've got some interesting stories to cover. I think the very top story is going to prove controversial, but let's see what's on those front pages, first of all. The Daily Mail. Is this the end of Trump's new bid to be president? That isn't him in the hat. That is, in fact, Duchess of Cambridge, I think. Telegraph. Trump sexually assaulted writer. US jury finds. And once again, the Duchess, they're finding it all terribly amusing. The Guardian. Trump sexually abused writer in the 1990s. That is an interesting, different... technically, it might be a nuance, might be something slightly more deeper and darker than that. In New York jury finds. The iNews. Archbishop clashes with number 10 on migration. I think they must have gone to press 5 minutes too early. Mirror, Trump, the sex attacker. There he is. And finally, the Daily Star has Moon Faker. What planet is Mad Vlad on? Those were your front pages. Let's have a closer look. So the first paper is The Guardian. Obviously, they have gone with the main story of the day. Leo.
Yeah, so Trump has been found guilty of sexually assaulting...
Liable.
Or liable, sorry. Yeah, it's a civil case. It's a civil case. There's no guilty. Although he was found not liable, not guilty.
Not liable for rape.
For rape.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, he didn't really put his best foot forward. He didn't. he made it easy for the prosecution. Yeah. He said it was a hoax. Then admitted he just called things hoaxes because it was fun to call things hoaxes. He said he'd never met her. Then there's a photograph of him with her. He mistook her for his ex-wife. He thought the photo of her was a picture of his ex-wife, which shows that, he might not even remember meeting people that he's actually been married to. And, of course, he admitted doing similar things. And he also changed his story various times. So yeah, but did have some classic Trump moments. There was a moment when somebody was questioning him, a female prosecutor was questioning him, and he said she wasn't my type. Yeah. And then he said, "You're not my type either." Yeah. It's like, all right.
Yeah. He really does go for that angle, doesn't he? Tries to make the whole thing feel like he's just kind of batting away some accusations on a stump somewhere. And that was actually the context in which he mistook her for his wife, one of his wives, because they said, who is this you're with here? Yeah. And it was somebody he went on to marry and had been having an affair with. That's who he thought it was, and it was in fact the woman that was accused. So, yeah, I mean,
so it was his type.
Yeah, exactly.
After all, essentially,
Women in the 90s look very similar.
I don't know about this. I mean, I can certainly see why his enemies would pounce on it, and as you say, he's set it up. But I can also see why people who are disinclined to regard this as being a serious blow will find wriggle room.
Well, I mean, he's the pouncer.
Yeah.
Out of everybody, and he's obviously also he has to pay her $5 million.
Yes.
For it.
That's significant for him. I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of his money is tied up in gold taps.
Yeah.
Golden toilets. I'll have to sell a couple of golden toilets. So I think that $5 million is significant for anybody, really. I mean, of course, he could probably raise it in a few days by crying foul.
What do you feel about the whole... I mean, they changed the law in order to make it possible. And obviously, as we just saw there in the news, Carrie Lake, who is obviously partisan herself, but is saying that this has happened. There was no way it was going to get through as a criminal case, but it's been brought as a civil case. Even then... the jury haven't agreed that he raped her, which is what she claimed. So they've definitely said, no, she's lying, he didn't rape you, which makes me wonder how they can then find against him for defamation, because the defamation was him saying, you're lying, I didn't rape you. I find the whole thing slightly...
I guess it becomes the definition of sexual assault.
Yeah.
Is all part of it. But, I mean, by his own words, and the other thing that was in the trial where that whole famous saying where he said, I grab, when you're a star, you can just grab people by the thing. He then said, yeah, that's what it's like. So it's never like he said it and then he's still backed it up.
Yeah.
And obviously this was how he went out and treated people, treated women. And the question now is, of course, what impact that's going to have on the election, whether he definitely gets the nomination. But at the same time,
he's gone up 7 points.
Well, this is the thing. But at the same time, that footage was out years ago, and it didn't affect. So people know how he behaved.
I don't know how widespread this was. I have a very, very small data set, but I have spoken to a number of people who were under the impression that conversation was recorded secretly during the election campaign. The grab him by the pussy conversation.
Yeah.
That was like 10 years old during the election campaign. It was when he was first on Apprentice, and he was trying to convince that guy that he was like a rock star.
He's trying to look cool in front of
But he wasn't
somebody.
in politics. I'm not saying it's good. It's not good, but it's not. It's not something he's saying during the election campaign.
No.
The fact that came out then and didn't derail him that time makes me wonder. I don't think this is going to be like a.
Well, the people who love him, and but that's what amazes me is because, of course, we go online, you say stuff about him, but I don't understand people. I can understand their going, oh, he's breaking the system up and all that stuff, but he doesn't seem like he's not a good person. Like,
but you don't. I mean, you don't necessarily want politicians or good people. What is a good person?
But I don't want a sex abuser.
But I mean,
well, you had one with Clinton, unquestionably. You had one with JFK. They have had a history of Democratic presidents who have been at least as bad, if not worse.
Have we ever had a politician who isn't some kind of terrible
Keir Starmer.
Watch this space. Josh, what have you got? You got the Telegraph?
Yeah, so Telegraph obviously going the same thing. Trump sexually assaulted writer, US jury finds. They've also got quite an interesting story about school leavers can work as doctors without earning a degree. So essentially, it becomes some sort of apprenticeship, which is amazing. They can go in and sort of learn on the job, which is not how I... I don't think I'm ever going to go to hospital again, hopefully.
Or hospitals as well?
Well, it's saying, yes, hospitals.
It makes sense for GPs, because, I mean, I assume they'll be able to work Google.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah,
I mean, I have literally watched them do that in front of me in the GP surgery. But then again, some of it is bedside manner and that sort of thing, and I don't think you get that from a school leave, right? There is that kind of like that little bit of depth of learning that you might want to project onto an older face. I don't know.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's almost like there's the reason why it's 7 years of medical school is because you don't want to see an 18-year-old next to you.
Maybe they could just artificially age them, like a chlorinated chicken or something. I don't know. Anything else on there?
Well, Starmer refuses to rule out Lib Dem coalition. He was asked a bunch of times, and he's basically just doesn't want to tie himself down, I guess. But
why would he be expected to rule that out? I don't think he should.
No, I know, but then they will use that as any kind of ammunition.
SNP coalition, that would be something a bit different.
I think he has ruled that out, hasn't he? Yeah.
And quite rightly. And in fact, they may well be finished now, which we'll be coming on to that later. What have you got on the iNews, Leo? Or?
The iNews has Archbishop clashes with number 10 on migration. So he hasn't actually announced, he hasn't said the thing that's going to clash, but he's due to say it. And speaking in December, he urged all politicians and the public to reject the shrill narratives that all who come to us for help should be treated as liars, scroungers, or less than fully human.
He's talking about you.
Well, I mean, like, if we've got an asylum system that's set up to help people who are genuinely in need, how do you stop people abusing that system? People come from Albania, aren't it's not a war-torn country. He seems to be a bit dismissive of Rwanda as well. And I've noticed as well that the Lambeth Palace, his residence in London, it's got a big wall around it, it's got doors that lock, so he's allowed to stop migration onto his boundaries, onto his land, but other people aren't allowed to stop onto their land.
Well, the history of the church has largely been one about creating false divisions between different parts of humanity, isn't it?
I miss those days.
Changing their tone at the last one. I do think it's a little bit off, the way that all people who are against, any attempt to mitigate the small boat crisis seem to regard the whole of the narrative, the whole of the rhetoric against them as being, as you say, just full of hatred and dismissing everyone as a scrounger. It's not that at all. It's just clearly that the system is currently allowing lots of infiltration. You may disagree, John.
No, I agree. I think that it needs to be sorted, but then we also need legal routes, and I don't believe that that's fully there.
That's not going to come through the church either, is it?
No, it's not going to come through the church.
But I think he was talking to Charles, because he's had quite a close communication with Charles recently, hasn't he?
Yes, well, that's what they were talking about behind that curtain.
Yeah.
They were like... That's not much. But it's interesting that the Eye has just... They did get the Donald Trump... news in time, and they've just sort of put it in the top left The top right. Isn't that mad that they would just go, you know what, don't worry about that.
And the story about the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't actually have any meat on it. He hasn't said the thing yet. He's just going to say.
He is going to say.
Yeah, I think someone just put the photo of him in and was like, I can't be bothered to get a photo of Trump.
We have 30 seconds to dispense with the Daily Star.
Yeah, Moonfaker. So just what we need, more conspiracy theorists. And what planet is Mad Vad on? Basically, Russians are now saying that America faked the moon landing.
Oh, are they?
And that's their way of kind of saying, oh, that's why you won, because it was all fake.
That's going to bring in a new demographic entirely. Well, I'll be watching that space. That's part one in the bag. Join us momentarily for Putin's tank. Johnson squares off. Starmer ignores woke. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So let's kick off the second section, Leo, with the Telegraph and a somewhat poignant display for those of us who grew up in the glory days of a Soviet military that were uniquely capable of challenging global American hegemony.
Yeah, well, Russia used to be assumed to have, the second best military in the world, and now it's apparently got the second best military in Ukraine. So at the Victory Day parade, Putin watched a single tank drive down Red Square. It's the only tank he's got left. And it's an 83-year-old relic. It's got Hello Kitty stickers on the side of it, or what appeared to be. I think he's going for the sympathy vote after all this. He's realised that the war is going so badly for him. There's no fly past, obviously, because a Ukrainian drone could get in there and hit another palace.
They used to have missiles that used to come past on trucks the size of blue whales.
Yeah, they're all hidden away now. Yeah. And in his speech, he was complaining about the West's empire and Russophobia. He sounded exactly exactly like a woke 14-year-old Western girl. It's kind of sad. And he's being attacked by Prigozhin, head of the Wagner mercenary group. He criticised Putin for appointing terrible generals. And I mean, I'm just, some people watching will still be thinking that Putin is somehow the last bastion of Christendom and, standing up against the degeneracy of the West. And that's a complete misreading of it.
Do you think some people in Russia are still thinking?
No, I think some people in the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, because we don't want to fall down that kind of fake news rabbit hole completely, the single tank is a traditional opener for that parade, and it is a veteran.
He usually has a few more.
Yeah. He had 51 vehicles this year in comparison with 131 last year and 197 in. So that is significant enough.
Yeah. And the Ukraine, they've lost nearly 4,000 tanks in Ukraine. So
that's according to the Ukraine.
And this tank they had was pretty rubbish. It was basically, it would have been better if they got like the A-team to make something up in a barn.
It's a bit like the end of Animal House. Remember that? Where they drive one into a huge cake and then they carry on. I don't know. I mean, it is almost going for the sympathy vote, but it's very difficult to say, isn't it? Whether we can draw an enormous amount of influence from
But
this.
the good news is, for the people who turned up, who were probably forced to be there, at least it was a very short parade.
It's over.
They were like, oh, brilliant! Look, there's tank. We can get out of here.
Serious crook in the neck. That's right. Staying in Central Asia, Josh, The Guardian has Turkmenistan putting even my family's abuse of the thermostat into the shade.
Indeed. Wow. Mind-boggling methane emissions from Turkmenistan revealed. Essentially, they're giving off. They're like huge gas producers, one of the biggest in the world, one of them. And two of their main fossil fuel fields is leaking. Just leaking, not even just like as a byproduct or anything.
No.
Just leaking through rubbish pipes and stuff. More than the UK combined.
Wow.
So the idea is, if we really want to do something about sorting out climate change and whatnot, this is where we need to head.
Turkmenistan.
Well, yeah, basically. Well, they do, but their recent strongman, voted in. Is like, I'm going to get on top of it, and hasn't done anything.
They have one of those kind of living God type individuals, I think, don't they? And massive, like 1,000-foot statues and all that. I think it's in that, isn't it? Yeah.
So basically, it is mad. I remember, trigonometry. He gave the talk about how basically Constantine. Sorry, of course. How you need to get into these countries. They're the ones that are actually going to make a difference. So we think that by putting our stuff in the recycling or whatever it is, but when you see something like this and you go, this can have a real world impact.
That could be fixed for a couple of $1 million or something.
No, that's what I'm saying. And actually, it'll save the money.
And also this gas, the methane gas that's leaking into the atmosphere, that can be sold. That's a fossil fuel, so they can actually use it and refine it. And it's ridiculous that people in Britain were all forced to use a paper straw, try and suck a gin and tonic through this thing that's just turned into like a mushy, limp bit of paper.
Gin and tonic, you surprised me.
Thought you'd be a Negroni man.
But this is, Turkmenistan. We can do whatever we like in Britain, and Turkmenistan is still doing more damage with these.
New Zealand, they had the farmers that had to strap buckets to their cows' backsides or something, didn't they, to catch the methane? They were being fined for having cows that fart in cows.
And we're shutting down, across the European Union, farms are being shut down to meet these ridiculous climate emissions targets, and it's all a nonsense.
Well, let's hope that some kind of A-team again, I guess, will be sent over there. Time's now Leo, and it seems that while still Prince, King Charles clashed with his Prime Minister over government policy. That's disgraceful. Yeah, so Boris Johnson clashed with Charles over the Rwanda deportation plan, according to Guto Hari, who was Johnson's Director of Communication. He worked here for a while as well. Yes, that's
didn't
right.
he? Boris...
Might be a she, actually.
Boris, what's that?
I think it might be a she.
Guto Hari?
Yeah. No?
Is it?
I think it might be. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, carry on.
So
it is a he. It is a he. I'm hearing in my ear. Sorry. Okay.
So Boris Johnson apparently squared up to the future king.
Right.
After
squared up.
Boris is quite boisterous, but I mean, would you want to take a punch?
Oi, Charlie!
Would you want to take a punch off those sausage fingers? They could do some damage.
Which one's got the sausage fingers?
Well, they both do. But this is ridiculous. I mean, for Charles, who's unelected, to be trying to dictate policy around our borders to the Prime Minister and putting pressure on him is an absolute outraged. He's not elected. And also, I don't know if you've noticed, as well as Archbishop of Canterbury and Lambeth Palace, Prince Charles, King Charles, whatever he's called, has got huge fences, huge walls, huge amounts of security around the places where he is to keep him safe.
He does have form on this front, doesn't he? I mean, it'd be interesting to see how he conducts himself as king, because that was one thing that, you know, throughout my entire lifetime, he's been known for getting involved in things that people feel, depending on whether they agree with him or not, they feel he shouldn't get involved in.
The Queen would never have done.
Absolutely.
The argument was that he was the prince at the time, and now he's the king. He's like chilled out. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. We will see whether or not he offers a direct route into the garden parties. Josh, Daily Mail now, and a little bit of jostling with a T to determine the turf on which the election battles will be fought.
Indeed. Woke issues don't matter to the public, claims Keir Starmer, who's repeatedly struggled to define what a woman is. I believe he is absolutely fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
And I think he's making a massive...
Culture wars are important.
Absolutely. Of course, that's partly why we're here, just through the interest of it, because I believe it was so important.
Our careers depend on it.
Well, it's not just our careers. I came here beyond this, before this was a career. I watched this channel before I actually appeared on it. And I think he's making a fundamental tactical mistake because they did do well, and I'm glad that they did.
Yeah.
It was despite those issues.
Yeah.
And because it's more that the Tories have just been arguably so terrible over the last however many years, that's why Labour's done well. But for him to sort of go, he's sort of go, no, don't worry about all that. People care about the NHS. He's wrong. People do care about the NHS. They do care about cost of living, but they really also care about this stuff. And the more that comes out, the more mad stuff that we've seen over these last years, people do actually care about it.
And it affects the NHS as well. Obviously, if you've got the NHS transitioning children from the age of 9, giving them drugs and hormones, I mean, that's an NHS issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when, as well, he's trying to convince us that, you know, the Labour Party are going to come in and sort out the economy and so on, which is what all that other stuff is based on. He hasn't really managed to demonstrate an enormously different sort of programme that I think is going to convince people, well, I will put up with a certain amount of trans nonsense because look at their economy.
Well, his most recent comment on it was that the majority of women, 99.9%, do not have a penis, which means that he thinks that 1 in 1,000 women does have a penis.
It's got to be the single drop rule, isn't it?
And then, as many people have said, if you can't trust somebody on something as fundamental as that kind of truth, what can you trust them on? And I understand why he's doing it. He's trying to have his cake and eat it and all of that, whatever. But he has to take a stand on these issues. And look, let's not pretend the Tories have been great on this. All this stuff came through under a Tory government, under Theresa May, because they were trying to out-left the left. And that's what got everybody in this mess in the first place.
The irony is that, I mean, you almost wonder whether it isn't like a secret operation by the right wing, you know, the things they've managed to drip into the public consciousness. I mean, maybe the newspapers, to some extent, it has been, but they completely failed and fumbled it. So far.
But these woke issues really do have real-world ramifications. I mean, grooming gangs, for example, were allowed to operate pretty freely because the authorities were afraid to apprehend them because they were afraid they'd look racist.
If you can't speak the truth, then everything else falls down. That's true. Leo, The Guardian is reporting that much of the language and behaviour seen in sexual abuse is also found in pornography, although I think a cynic might say there is a confounding variable involved there.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know which comes first. You know, we could be putting the horse before the cart here, but violent porn acts...
Oh, I've seen that one.
Although when I explain this story, we'll stop laughing. It's pretty grim. So violent porn acts occur in sexual abuse between under 18s, according to this report. So it's England's Children's Commissioner has called for the most robust online protections for under 18s. This is part of the online safety bill that's going through various changes as it goes through Parliament and gets reviewed. But they found the most common category of sexual violence was physical aggression, such as strangulation, choking or slapping, with name-calling also prevalent. I don't know, I spent my 30s having women demand this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
that is the funny thing, isn't it? There is definitely a culture in which some women do now expect that a bit of play, and then, of course, you have to judge how far it goes.
And, of course, if it's children watching it, I mean, this is one of the things I think the online safety bill could actually do some good, if there's some sort of age verification, because at the moment you just got to tick a box that says, I mean, and it's nonsense.
And most parents, I mean, I don't know about you, Josh, but most parents, I mean, I'm assuming it's not an issue for you. What is yours, like 1?
7 months.
7 months, OK.
She's
probably
smart.
OK at the moment. But I've never really said to Edward, my son is 15, I've never really said to him, do or don't watch porn online, or, you know, if you're going to, watch it, just be, or anything, because I sort of feel like anything I say is only going to send him scurrying
I
off
actually
to
had
investigate.
no, because you know what? My eldest was around at some kid's house, and it was on the iPad that their dad used.
Right.
You know, and this is like when he was 11, and I sat down. I was very clear about it, about what it means, how the fakery of it, and all of this stuff, because I wanted to, because they are going to have access, and they have like their mobile phones from 11 years old. Someone in their school is going to show them something, and I wanted to give him some context to it. But what's interesting about this article is, as you were sort of saying about the chicken and the egg or whatever, the horse, is there's about 400 interviews they went into, and then they were saying that with children and about child abuse with other children, and but really they actually only identified, of those 400 or so, a handful where pornography was either mentioned or these specific acts were mentioned. So even though watching this stuff is incredibly damaging and has an impact, I don't believe they've made a cause here for why someone commits sexual abuse as a child to another child. I don't think that watching porn is the reason why someone might a child might rape another child. I think there are other factors in terms of their homes and mental health and all the other stuff.
It's like addiction, isn't it? It's always filling some kind of weird hole that isn't, you know...
Filling some kind of weird hole. No, that's another...
We're going to get down that. Well, we've reached the midway point. Time for a little breather. Come back for activist training, comedy club suing and Starbucks chucking. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So we kick off our third section with the Express now, Josh. And in the coup of the decade, they have infiltrated Just Stop Oil's training sessions.
Oh, it's brilliant, this story. Just Stop Oil's secret training sessions where they refused to start until the pronouns were agreed.
Wow.
So this is someone from the Express, a journalist. They probably dressed in they probably dressed like Leo. And they bought a vegan sandwich from M&S as their cover and went under.
They've gone in with their own little tub of...
but not in plastic. Maybe a ceramic. Something they bought in Morocco. Anyway, and they're like, hey, dudes, how are you today?
Kids.
So it turns out, they all have the more senior of the crusty people have their nicknames. There's like rhubarb and Brussels sprout, and they also have to be they were doing a lot of role play. Like imagine that you've got a member of the public screaming at you, get a job, and whatnot. And this is like, and they all had to walk slowly around the room and sort of have all this abuse held of them, so they would know what to do in the real world when they really annoy people.
Wow, because I bet that is exactly the same. When somebody hates you is shouting that at you rather than just somebody you've met in a training video.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of amazing, really, how... And they're just... some of the people on there would just, say, what would you do if, the paramedics came? And they were like, well, this is... they were saying that you've got to hold your ground because resistance doesn't have terms and conditions.
You've got to stop somebody getting to hospital.
Well, this is what someone thought, and they said, no, you've got to let them through. So they actually do have a policy of letting through...
so what if the paramedic is back, 10 cars back? It's ridiculous. And they admitted that they know that they risk accidents and they risk harming people who are completely innocent bystanders. And the pronouns people, apparently the meeting didn't start for about 20 minutes because everybody had to describe their gender identity and their preferred pronouns. So, he, they, and all that kind of stuff.
It's beyond parody. It's obviously, we keep going back to the Life of Brian thing or those student ones where they would snap their fingers because some people found clapping triggering. That sort of thing.
Also, I doubt they're dressed like me.
But at the same time...
I'm dressed like somebody on a yacht in the 80s.
You think so, Miami Vice style?
Yeah.
Can you do your arms up? Do your...
All right, Tubbs.
But the point is, despite all this nonsense, they are still being extraordinarily disruptive, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, they're great. Well, I just think, you know what they need to do? Go to Turkmenistan.
Yeah.
And then try that. Try your slow walk in there and see where that's going to get you there.
Go to China.
Role play that. Leo, your specialist subject now. The Daily Mail takes us through the looking glass of Scottish politics.
Yeah, so back down and say you're sorry or I'll see you in court. Joanna Cherry gives Fringe venue The Stand a 7-day ultimatum after being cancelled amid a gender row. So she is an SNP Member of Parliament. Yep. She was invited to talk at The Stand, do one of these in conversation with evenings. Yep. And then because she's gender critical, she believes that there are biological differences between males and females, which is just what science says. It's not, people say gender critical. It's actually just science. It's biological fact. Because she believes that, she was no platform. She was cancelled from The Stand, which is actually owned by another SNP Member of Parliament. Yeah. So the staff at The Stand said that they weren't willing to work if she was doing this evening, and that apparently breaches the Equality
Act. So she now wants an apology, and that will be that, or does she want money?
Well, she can take them to court under the Equality Act. And this has happened before. Maya Forstarter, Twisted Forstarter, she took her employers to court after being cancelled for similar reasons.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see if it does go all the way. I've got to be honest. I found it a little bit sad. I've played The Stand loads of times. It used to be a great club, and I've done gigs. I've done a whole Edinburgh Fringe there.
No, me too. I've done the Fringe there, and I've done loads of times for years. It's a great people. I like Tommy, who owns it, who's the SNP. Well, I know you don't. You've had your issues, but he was always fair. Doing it's one of the few places where you can actually sort of not lose that much money in Edinburgh when you do The Stand.
Yeah,
when you do the Fringe.
I mean, it would look like a good deal. Sometimes by the end of it, you were pretty much back where you started. As you were with it, it was no worse than the other venues.
What about the banning of lesbians?
Yes, well, this is the point. This is the disappointment, and this is what's so sad about it. And
bad, really.
It is bad. It's massively bad. And it's illegal. This is the argument, and she says she can sue, and they need to apologise and whatnot.
I don't think it's sad that she's suing. I think it's sad
that they've... Well, it's sad that our industry are so weak in front of these people. Just like with Sadowitz last summer, where, some 18-year-olds like, oh, no, he told a joke. It's like... and if comics aren't taking a stand at that time and protecting other comics or other performers or whatever it is, we're all going to lose our venues. It's mental.
It's getting nibbled down.
Yeah, every comedian that's worth anything has got something that offends somebody, and we can't let, you know, if there's some 16-year-old with a summer job punching tickets, we can't let them be the moral arbiters deciding what gets to be seen on stage.
By the way, she's been replaced by Ken Loach, so it's nice that they care about that, but they don't care about Jews. So thanks, Stan
It
staff.
does feel like it's like the whole nation. There's been a nationwide rollout of my Sunday lunches, basically, where I have to be careful what I say in front of my teenage daughter, because otherwise the whole family just kind of throws down their cutlery and marches off. You know? It's like that is the level of, as you say, of moral authority that's been ceded. Daily Mail again. Now, Josh, someone's having a bit of trouble with their flat white.
OK, very good. Exclusive. Woman accused of being transphobic by Starbucks worker insists she used the word lady to describe another staff member without realising they did not identify as a woman. So look, anybody who's seen this footage online, there's a trans woman who is basically going mental and screaming at this little old lady and say, "You're a transphobe." She said, "I'm not a transphobe," and all this stuff. There is an assumption there that this person had misgendered this trans woman, calling her a he or whatever. No, it's actually funnier than that. It's more interesting than that. It was actually, she said, "No, I'm not talking to you," when she came over and said, "I'm dealing with this, like, you can't use cash in here." She said, "Oh, I'm talking to the lady behind the thing." And they went, "That's not a lady, that's a him." And so there's two trans people in Starbucks. That's what's really happened. So it's the manager getting offended on the behalf of probably a mate who she's like, "Come down, it's a trans safe haven."
And then the manager went over and
freaked out, and then somebody else's phone, and supposedly the actual footage didn't capture how mental this person really was. This person has since been fired, but it's just funny that there was actually a little bit extra to the thing. And the thing that they were really upset about was that they couldn't use cash in Starbucks. After all of that.
This is the thing that jumped out at me. You can't use cash in Starbucks anymore. I mean, this is how Scottish people have been living for decades now, trying to spend our tenors. But it's nice that English people are feeling a taste of it.
But I've said this before. I had to go. I lost my cars; they were stolen. And while I was waiting for replacements, I had some cash, and I found just how limiting that is on a daily basis now. Loads of pubs in London, you can't buy booze with cash. I mean, that seems to me that's like civilizational. Extinction level threat, isn't it? You can't go into a pub and just buy a drink with cash.
It's crazy.
And you can't really blame the trans worker for kicking off, because they're constantly fed this narrative that they're victims and they're constantly under attack and everything is.
Well, you can blame. She picked up the bag and she went mad, and if you physically assault her, that's not an excuse to physically assault somebody.
He went mental. And there is absolutely no excuse for that. But I do think what is happening is we've seen this a lot, I think, in the last few years. What you notice is that everyone has their flashpoint, everyone has their sore point or their nerve or whatever that's easily, activated. And they almost wait for the opportunity to make that what the argument is about. So the argument can be about almost anything, but they're just waiting for you to use the wrong word, look at them funny or whatever, and then he can make it being about trans.
And they're constantly told
trans at all.
And they're constantly told in The Guardian that yes, you're under attack, and yes, you're constantly being misgendered, and if anybody says this, it's bigotry. So it justifies this victim narrative that they're being fed by the media justifies these actions.
And meanwhile, the cashless society moves apace. Guardian now, Leo. News of a hostile and dangerous environment for LGBT journalists. This must be the Ukraine, I imagine, isn't it?
No, this is the UK is a hostile environment for LGBTQ plus journalists. Study suggests. Bit of an issue here. So the research, which was commissioned by the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity. The Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity. Oh my God. I mean, historians are going to look back. Historians are going to look back and be like, there was a Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity. But so it indicated that many saw their roles as dangerous and wanted more support from senior colleagues. However, the abuse that they were getting was on Twitter. And Twitter isn't UK-based. Twitter is global. And as we've seen in other cases where people say, oh, these footballers are getting so much abuse or whatever, it's coming from India, from Brazil, it's coming from all around the world where people are less tolerant than in the UK. And also, I mean, it is worrying that so many LGBTQ plus journalists feel that they don't get enough support from their work. Hopefully the Guardian will buck up their ideas and start providing that support. But, with so much stuff like Drag Queen Story Hour, the infiltration of the sort of gender ideology into schools, I think it's getting people's backs up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the individual cases are like, but it does seem to me like a slightly thing to be whinging about.
Well, the thing is first of all, it's a Q&A with like 40 people, number one.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and they say that most of the stuff is Twitter, and it's also to do with trans stuff. Now, genuine homophobic or transphobic abuse is, of course, wrong.
Yeah.
But when the trans ideology movement literally takes every little thing to be abuse, when it actually isn't abuse, they think that there are two sexes.
Yeah.
Someone saying, by the way, sex is real, or there shouldn't be a male rapist in women's prisons, or that is taken to be abuse.
We've had years of it, of them saying that, X is not up for discussion.
Yeah.
We're like, I'm sorry, X is up for discussion. It's very much up for discussion. And that is exactly what you're absolutely right. Plus, on top of which, journalism was always understood to be a job in which you expected, there to be a few shells whistling overhead. Pathetic. Josh, something is damaging women's brains. Could it be the endless slew of woke gender woo, I wonder?
No, I don't think so. It seems to be living in a patriarchal society for thousands of years, 10,000 years. So stress is caused by gender inequality is damaging women's brains. So this study examined 8,000 MRI scans with women in different parts of the world, and where there was a more gender inequality, the left-hand side of women's brains were thinner.
So that's a good thing, right? You can never be too thin or too rich.
That's what makes them like. But
your brain looks great in that.
I'd be curious to see.
Looks great under political.
How thin your brain is.
We're going
your wife's
to
brain.
go to the break. I'm sorry to cut that one short. Final break now. Make sure you come back for Japanese smiles, Facebook medals, and De Niro nappies. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. Leo, the Daily Mail again. Could this be a George Floyd moment, but for dogs?
Well, I can't. Rough. So a row is broken out after armed Met cops shoot dead 2 dogs and taser their owner. And I think they did that in the wrong order. But they've come under fire for disproportionate use of force. But experts have pointed out that these dogs did maul a woman just moments earlier. So there's a video on social media. I don't think we've got it, but it shows the police following a man with 2 barking dogs in Limehouse in East London. And the situation escalated when one of the dogs is shot dead while the screaming owner was then tasered and pinned to the ground. And the second dog was subsequently shot dead as screaming witnesses looked down at the scene from balconies of surrounding blocks.
A lot of screaming.
A lot of screaming, yeah, a lot of screaming.
I wouldn't describe the man as screaming personally, but I suppose that's maybe a trivial point.
Well, we've got to watch the video first.
I've seen it, yeah.
But the gangs use dogs because they know that they can't be prosecuted the same way as if you've got an offensive weapon like a knife. So, so dogs are.
But they're not suggesting there's a gang.
No, but I'm saying this is the problem we've got. There are dangerous dogs out there being used.
Yeah.
And I don't think the police have got time when somebody's just been mauled by a dog to check the dog's microchip and check its record to see if it's ever been involved in, I mean, it's a split second. It's a split second thing. And, I know as the parent of a baby, and I've seen some of the horrific injuries that are done to toddlers by some of these horrible dogs in parks. I'm like, man, what have you got to do? Like,
I'll be honest with you, as a parent of a dog, as an owner of a dog, I've seen some dogs that I would quite happily just shoot on sight.
Yeah.
They just terrify me. They're trying to get to my dog, and there's an owner with a leash kind of holding them back. I think some people do seem to not understand or perhaps secretly enjoy the amount of intimidation they get, even if they don't actually hurt people.
A sensible person would just get gerbils. They're like dogs, but they're little.
Golden retrievers. What do you think?
You needed a little leash.
Yeah.
But obviously people are very upset by dead dog, probably more than dead humans. You saw dead arms. But someone's done a memorial where, in memory of 2 beloved dogs who were tragically shot by the Metropolitan Police. That was a handwritten sign. So very sweet. And a red bow with flowers.
Oh, that's nice. We get so little, extrajudicial killing in this country. That's the fact.
They have to I think one of the dogs was Brazilian.
Times now, Josh. Japanese smiling trainers are smiling for 2 reasons.
Yeah, Japan learning to smile again after forgetting how in pandemic, because they wear... Actually, mask wearing is quite common within parts of Asia anyway, and I always thought it was being there. You think it's like a rude thing, but actually it's a very polite thing because when they're sick, they wear a mask to stop other people getting a cold. Yeah. This is like a common thing, and I'd never flipped that sort of solipsistic Western way of thinking to actually caring about society.
Right.
But the thing is, so they've been wearing masks all the way through. They've been very strict on it, and there's evidence that it's affected their rate of infection has been quite low. And some people are saying that's because of their mask use. Yeah. Whether that's true or not. But they've forgotten how to smile.
Yeah.
And smiling is actually not massive in Japanese culture anyway, because white teeth is seen as a weird... They liked dark...
Smiling with your eyes is fine, though, isn't it? You've got to just learn twinkle your eyes. Can you not do that?
Sounds like Britain.
I feel like
I wouldn't mention the eyes, Simon. Come on.
I'm a good eye smiler. Even though I've got tiny eyes, I can make them crinkle quite convincingly. Like that. Look how sincere I appear to be.
But yeah, people have to learn how to do it again. But I remember people at the time when it was going on here with the mask, people would say people didn't know how we would be as human beings again.
That's right. Loads of children have grown up without facial recognition software installed, and they've missed their opportunity now, basically. Yeah. Mirror now, Leo. First trans women win cycling and swimming medals. Now androids are winning jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so the Meta, which is the new word for Facebook, boss Mark Zuckerberg has won medals in his first Brazilian jiu-jitsu competition, which I should imagine he organised. Probably like Putin winning those judo competitions. Nobody wants to like dislocate the shoulder of like Mark Zuckerberg.
Although at bear wrestling, Putin does.
There's a picture. There he is.
He does look unusual. strangely human, actually, in that picture, doesn't he?
Is he on steroids or something? That is so different. He used to be such a wispy, grey man, and now he's all sort of buff. He's getting praise from Conor McGregor. I wish he'd do something about the Meta share price, though. It's absolutely tanking because of his gamble in the metaverse. Yeah,
but there's some footage of him losing a fight and then arguing with the referee, and then the referee says, "Oh, it's a draw." and then he do it again, and he suddenly miraculously wins.
Zuckerberg just places his hand on his forehead, and the referee just goes.
It's crazy. So
Howard down. Josh, we've got a couple more to get to before the end of the show. This is a bit of a no defecation, please, Sherlock story, I think.
No defecation. Cut boozy parties to stop inappropriate behaviour at work. So, obviously, people working from home, there's the argument that actually having these social get-togethers is more important than ever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, living in the litigious world where everyone has to be on their best behaviour the entire time, the old days of people getting drunk. And some people would say that was really bad, like if the bad stuff that came out of it. But also, people say don't drink alcohol because you don't get those chances anymore.
Yeah, but the whole point of drinking alcohol is so that you can behave inappropriately, isn't it? That is literally what it does for you.
And what's interesting is the woman who's saying all this is called Anne Frank, so no wonder she wants to keep the noise down.
Oh, finally, my goodness, you're treading very close to the edge now. Leo, we have an inspiration to deluded old blowhards everywhere. Robert De Niro, a father again.
So Robert De Niro is going to become a father to his seventh child just months before his 80th birthday. He's probably got about 30 seconds as well.
That was enough.
I think that's a bit old. I mean, doesn't something happen to your sperm after?
I think it's very bad. If he has used traditional methods to do that, I think that's irresponsible.
Yeah. Well, I think he's just going to be like, "You talking to me?"
Yeah.
Because I've got dementia.
The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail. Is this the end of Trump's new bid to be president? My guess is no. The Telegraph. Trump sexually assaulted writer, US jury finds. Guardian. Trump sexually abused writer in the 1990s. New York jury finds. The iNews has Archbishop clashes with number 10 on migration. No one cares. Mirror. Trump the sex attacker. And finally, the Daily Star. Moon faker. What planet is Mad Vlad on? So that's all we have time for. Thank you very much to my guests, Leo Kurz and Josh Howie. I'll be back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Leo again and Bryce Devlin. And if you're watching at 5 a.m., stay tuned for breakfast. Other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I will just mention in these dying seconds, it was my birthday today, and I couldn't have hoped to spend it in better company. Thank you very much. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. On tonight's show, the government has a good idea. Rather than having to go to the GP to get a repeat prescription, you can go to the pharmacist. I like the sound of it, but will it in real terms actually work? We'll discuss the decline of the fox since fox hunting was banned. That's an interesting one. Roy Chubby Brown, the comedian, banned by a big theatre chain. What does this mean for the future of British comedy? And she's from Phoenix, Arizona. She was a well-known TV presenter. She was a liberal. She's now a conservative, and she could even be Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate in their election next year. We'll find out in Talking Pints who Carrie Lake really is. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed. The evening news for you. The Information Commissioner's Office says it won't be taking any action against Lancashire Police over the disclosure of Nicola Bulley's personal information. The force came under criticism after the 45-year-old's body was discovered in the River Wyre in February following a 3-week search. Meanwhile, the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, also says it's identified 2 areas of learning after the force had contact with Nicola Bulley in the days before she went missing. An independent review by the College of Policing into the handling of the case is also underway. Its findings will be published in the autumn. Now, the Met Police Commissioner has defended his force's policing of the coronation after some criticism for the arrest of 6 protesters ahead of the event. Sir Mark Rowley described the arrests as unfortunate, but stressed he supports the arresting officer's actions. The force confirmed the individuals face no further action after being stopped under the new Public Order Act. And the Prime Minister has today said he supports people's right to protest, but says the new laws are needed to protect against serious disruption. Pharmacists will be able to give prescription medicine without a GP sign-off in the latest government plans to ease pressure on doctors. Under the measures, patients will be able to get treatments for 7 common conditions, including a sore throat and ear infections, without seeing a doctor. It's hoped the new guidelines, which will come into place this winter, will free up about 15 million appointments at surgeries over the next 2 years. Rishi Sunak says the measures will also help cut waiting times for those seeking medical help. International news, and the former Prime Minister of Pakistan has been arrested by anti-corruption police in Islamabad. His supporters are being told to shut the country down. Footage shows paramilitary troops in riot gear surrounding the former cricketer inside what looks like a courtroom. The move has led to protests in Mr. Khan's hometown of Lahore, and members of his political party are now calling for support. Imran Khan was ousted from power in a parliamentary vote in April last year. Here at home, a marine barge which will be used to house migrants has arrived in UK waters. It's called the Bibby Stockholm and it docked in Falmouth this morning, getting ready to be refurbished ahead of its use as a housing centre. The 3-storey barge will be used for at least 18 months and can hold up to 500 people as they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. It's part of a government scheme to move asylum seekers away from costly hotel accommodation. And ambulance workers in the southeast of England have been striking today as their union escalated its industrial action over pay. Unite's members employed at South Central and South East Coast Ambulance Service continued their strike until 10 o'clock tonight. Last month, the members rejected the government's offer of a lump sum cash payment and a 5% pay rise. Members of other health unions accepted the same offer. And lastly, thunderstorms have swept across parts of the UK today, causing disruption for road users and travellers. The Met Office earlier issued a yellow weather warning, which is in place until 10 o'clock tonight. It covers much of southern England, East Anglia and parts of the Midlands. The Met Office added there could be some damage to property caused by flash flooding. We'll keep our eye on that weather story for you. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As we travel around the country doing Farage at Large, one of the commonest complaints we get from the audiences is they cannot get to see their GP. They may want to get a diagnosis, they may want something simple like a repeat prescription, and it's driving people mad. And maybe that did impact a bit on the Conservatives in the local elections last Thursday. Well, as part of the government's primary healthcare plan, they've come up overnight with what I think is a really good idea. Rather than having to go to your GP for a relatively common complaint, perhaps a sore throat, earache, something like that. And if you need a repeat prescription, why not bypass the GP and go straight to the pharmacist? Gosh, I think it's a good idea. I think they've actually got something right, and it could free up millions of GP appointments every single year. Question is, can the pharmacies cope? Do they have the means to do all of this physically? And given, I was surprised by this, that 670 pharmacies have closed around the country since 2015, and there are some real arguments going on with government about funding. Can the pharmacies actually do this? If it worked, it would be a terrific, practical, sensible solution. Certainly in America, you would go to a pharmacist with a common ailment. So, it's the government's big plan. I like the idea of it. Will it work? Let me know your thoughts. Farage@gbnews.uk. Well, somebody who can probably answer that question is Dr. Layla Hanbeck, Chief Executive of the Association of Independent Pharmacies. Layla, we know there's a major crisis with our GPs. We have a rapidly rising population. Our ratio of GPs per person is getting worse every single year. This idea, on the face of it, looks quite clever.
Yes, definitely. It's a step in the right direction, Nigel. And this is something that we have been asking for. And, we've been saying for years that we're willing to support the NHS in every way that we can. The problem has always been that those calls have not been listened to. So it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Maybe they're listening now,
Maybe they're listening now. But there is a big elephant in the room, and that is that our funding since 2015 was cut, and then it stayed at the same place since 4 years ago, despite the inflation, despite everything else.
So let's just get this straight.
Yeah.
You get funding from central government for helping the NHS.
Of course. So 90% of all the activities that we do in a pharmacy are absolutely NHS related. So our funding essentially comes from the NHS. But that funding pot has for many years been pretty empty. So there is a deficit of £1.1 billion, a shortfall of £1.1 billion because of
the government are promising another 645 million for this scheme, which is sort of halfway towards what you would like to see. But presumably, this plan means a lot more work for pharmacists as well.
Yes, and that is something that we need to dive into and look at in terms of like what the specifications are. So at the moment, we're obviously struggling with workforce challenges, and depends in terms of like how much this is going to land on pharmacies who are currently under a lot of pressure.
Now, you do also, as a pharmacy, sell other products.
Yeah.
So the shop can make a profit. Would this help that, hinder that, make no difference?
Well, again, that OTC bit for an independent pharmacist is a very, very small portion of what they do. So 90% of what they do are NHS services, from dispensing
90%?
90%, and sometimes over 90%. I mean, in rural places, in places where deprivation is, you have more than 90% of your activities NHS funded.
Because some of the big chains, I suppose, are more like supermarkets with a pharmacy attached.
Yeah, so that you've got the nationals, like Boots and like supermarkets that have other activities, but independent pharmacies, essentially, all their activities, a vast majority part of their activities is NHS related.
And how many of them are there? Independent?
Well, at the moment, the number is shrinking pretty fast. So since 2015, we've seen about 800 pharmacists shutting their doors for good. And this year, we've anticipated, if the core funding, that pot I was talking about, where there's shortage of £1.1 billion, is not supported with an injection of liquidity, then we'll see more pharmacists closing the doors. In effect, about 600 to 700 closing by the end of this year, if nothing happens.
Right, so this plan comes in at a time when the independents are closing down anyway.
Yes. So we want the government to make sure that the support the government... The supporters, the problem that we have, we don't know the details yet in terms of like what is expected of us as part of this service that we're asking to do.
How much? I mean, this is the big announcement of the day. And, Rishi's mother, of course, was a pharmacist, and he's gone back to Southampton where he grew up. And, all of that makes a very good story. How much consultation has there been with your group ahead of this announcement?
Well, there hasn't been a lot of consultation about this particular thing, but we have been saying to the government that, we want to do more, but fund us appropriately and pay us essentially what we deserve for the work that we do. A lot of pharmacists, Nigel, are working out of pocket. So the drug bill is going up, the medicine costs are going up, and a lot of them are dispensing medicines at a loss. No one should do that, but they do that because, again, we cannot add our costs onto the patients and the consumers. So whilst other businesses can do that, we don't do that. And so they take it on themselves.
In short, Leyla Hambeck, will this plan work?
Well, it depends on the government if they're willing to make it work, and on the officials that work with us. So we are entering negotiations with them to see how this is going to pan out. We have always been willing. We kept our doors open throughout the pandemic, and we never shut our doors. And we've always been there. We've always been there for the public. And so it depends on them if they want to make it work.
You did great work during the pandemic. Unlike many GP surgeries, all they would offer was Zoom consultations. I don't expect you to comment on that, but I want this to work.
No comment.
No, I want this to work. It makes so much sense. Thank you for joining me here at GB News. Let's hope that it can work. Keen to get your thoughts, keen to get your views. In a moment, is it possible that banning fox hunting has now led to foxes becoming endangered in parts of rural Britain? We'll look at that in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So will the plan to let pharmacists do a lot more diagnosis and give repeat prescriptions, will it actually work? Some of your views coming in. Steve says, are pharmacists doctors? No. If a pharmacy prescribes antibiotics for a sore throat, which weeks later might actually be diagnosed as cancer, who is responsible and who gets sued? Steve, with respect, the point is that we want people with really serious conditions to go to their GP so that they can get scans rather than having to wait weeks for an appointment because people with minor ailments are in their way. And if you went to a GP with a sore throat, you would not immediately be sent off for a scan. It's only if that condition gets worse. John says, nothing original here, Nigel. Pharmacists in France and many other countries have been on the front line for years. John, you're absolutely right. France, America, wherever you go, pharmacists have a really important role in people's lives. All we're doing here at last, I hope, is playing catch up. Time for one more. Jason says, we're once again letting the NHS off the hook. They still cry out for more money regardless. The NHS is not underfunded, it's just poorly managed. Well, Jason, if ever you wanted to see an example of centralised socialist-style organisation, management and expenditure of money, then the NHS is where you would go. However, I thought our witness, Layla, a moment ago, made the point that small, independent pharmacists, 90% of their work is NHS work. And if they're closing in their hundreds because they can't make ends meet, then it seems to me something, if this plan's going to work, needs to be done. Now, last night we had Professor Matthew Goodwin on the programme, and both he and I have been speculating that the next set of net migration figures will be at an all-time high. Well, a leak published in today's Daily Telegraph suggesting that in a couple of weeks' time, when the net migration figures come out, there will be 675,000 people. That is double the highest ever year before Brexit. And just think about this. Net migration ran from 1945 to the year 2000 at about an average of 30,000 a year. And we're now talking about pushing up towards 750,000. Oh, and that's without those crossing the channel in boats. Is it any wonder we can't get GP appointments? Is it any wonder that our kids can't get onto the housing ladder, yet nobody in Westminster even wants to talk about it? Maybe that's because those that make our laws generally have little understanding of the real world. I was vociferously opposed to the fox hunting ban that came in 2004. It seemed to me it had nothing to do with animal rights or the welfare of foxes, just a deep dislike from an urban majority against a significant, quite significant, majority living in the countryside who wanted to pursue fox hunting, part of their way of life, as it had been for centuries. Well, blow me down. As a few years go by, we're now told that by 103 vets who published a paper to say that in rural England, the fox in some areas is in danger of completely dying out. Why is that? Well, we're not hunting them with hounds, we're shooting them at night with lamps, with long-range rifles, and we're actually taking out a lot of the fitter foxes. It seems extraordinary that you ban fox hunting and the numbers decline. By the way, none of this applies to urban foxes, which are increasing. And the hypocrisy of the whole thing. I mean, the RSPB, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, they shoot foxes because if foxes are there, where there are ground nesting birds, they will do vast damage. And yet, because they recognise a long-range rifle shot at night is unlikely to get a clean kill, guess what they do? They send dogs in to finish them off. The whole thing is absolutely crackers. Alex Proud is a club and restaurant owner, a Telegraph columnist who has opined on this subject before. Alex, can you believe that we banned fox hunting and we now have a shortage of rural foxes?
Well, obviously, the absurdity of that is wonderful and a perfect illustration of what happens when stupid legislation, as you rightly said, the tyranny of the tiny majority over the very large minority and geographically very separate lifestyles. That's what happens when this sort of stupid legislation occurs. As you rightly said, legislation that was nothing to do with preventing cruelty to animals. I mean, let's face it, if you want to prevent cruelty to animals, let's talk about how we kill our cows and look after pigs and how we breed chickens and various other farmed animals and worry about that far more than we do foxes in the countryside. And it was an absurd piece of legislation that's to do with some very ancient sense of class war that toffs hunt and that posh people get on horses and they beat the poor people from their horse, which is obviously absurd because actually hunting in the countryside is actually an extraordinarily cross-class pursuit. It's nothing to do with posh people or poor people. It tends to do with country people.
No, Alex, I go to the Boxing Day hunt meet, West Kent and the old Surrey and Burstow. I go every year. I've been going for decades, and it's far from a group of posh people. It's an incredible cross-section of people who are there, although, of course, they're not allowed to hunt with dogs. They hunt a trail. But, Alex, you know, I was on the march. There were over 400,000 of us that marched through London to say, let us get on with what we want to do. By the way, I've never hunted a fox myself, but I absolutely support the right of others to do so. But I wonder, as a restaurateur, whether what we're really seeing here is a total change of our thinking about animals. I mean, I bet you have vegetarian and vegan dishes now on your menus.
Yes, I do, and again, I live and let live. One of my eldest son is a rampant vegetarian vegan. It changes from time to time. I have nothing against it, and it's an extremely healthy lifestyle choice. I tend to feel that the concept of live and let live is fairly important. I'm far more interested in legislation about healthy farming of animals, not using steroids to make animals grow at huge rates. You know, the steroids in animals come through to us, and that's why we have the problems we have now with becoming with antibiotics, etc. So I'm much more concerned about that I am, and the humane killing of animals for farm is much more important than this ridiculously tiny subject. And hunting still goes on. Obviously, it's drag hunting now, and I'm glad that the hunts have survived and the hounds have survived, and also a part of the countryside and our history has survived. I just don't really like it when a tiny majority rules a very large minority. I might get in trouble with you there, Nigel, because we could mention Brexit, but I wouldn't do that on your show.
You'd be welcome. Alex, you want to come in and argue about Brexit with me? You're welcome any day of the week. But your point that these urbanites who call themselves liberals are actually the most illiberal people that have ever lived in our country. Alex, thank you very much indeed for joining me on this very interesting and perhaps to some surprising debate. Roy Chubby Brown has been a comedian. Yes, of course, he uses bad language. Yes, of course, he is outrageous. And yet, he sells videos, DVDs, discs. He packs theatres all over the country. He has done for decades. And now, a major theatre chain has banned him for not being in line with their principles. Comedian Jim Davidson will join me to discuss that in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
His name is Royston Vasey, but he's known as Roy Chubby Brown. And for 35 years, he's been going around this country making people laugh in very considerable numbers. But now, the Ambassador Theatre Group, big theatre group in Britain, Europe, indeed in the States as well, have cancelled Roy Chubby Brown. According to Brown's team, it's because apparently he doesn't fit their equity, diversity and inclusivity policy. Well, if that's the case, is the future of any comedian secure? Well, who better to join me than Jim Davidson? Jim, what is going on? I mean, Roy Chubby Brown, he's rude, he's loud, but you know what? If I want to pay my 35 quid to go and see him, isn't that up to me?
Well, I think it is, Nigel, and I think it is. People should vote with their feet, but here's the thing. If you look at Roy Chubby Brown, he's different to me. We're both as outrageous and probably like telling rude jokes. But he's not political, is he? He's not that, you don't know who he votes for. Obviously, looking at him like that, he's obviously a raving loony. But you don't quite know. So it's not a political thing. I just think that the Ambassador Theatre Group, who I've known for years, I've worked for Ambassador Theatre Group for 40 years and now found myself cancelled as well. I'm not sure why they cancel. I think it is because I think maybe that certain firms, certainly the Ambassador Theatre Group, are struggling for money and profit. And so they're looking all around the world for finance, and they don't want these people to say, oh, you've got that awful man. So they sort of clear the decks. They want to be nice and lovely and woke. And that's why Chubby's got himself cancelled, I think.
I see. So you've got financial problems, so you cancel the very comedians that pack it to the rafters, yeah?
Yep, I got a better one with that, and I'll tell you specifically. I was booked to play the Key Theatre in Peterborough and some theatre in Barnstaple. They're owned by the same group. And it was sold out. And a month before I went there to do the gigs, I was banned from going the next time. So they wanted me to go this time because I'd sold both theatres out, but they don't want me back because it doesn't fit in. And again, these are people that are looking for finance. It's from the Arts Council, from this. ATG are a fantastic group. And to be fair, Nigel, if I didn't like someone, I owned a theatre and I didn't like them, I wouldn't let them in as well. But, you know, is it designed, is that decided by theatrical people or maybe some secretary or some finance person that's a bit...
But it's all one way, Jim, isn't it? How many left-wing comedians are getting banned from these theatres?
Well, no, because they're all lefty lovies anyway. Yeah. But you know, where we go... But the great thing is, people will find Chubby Brown. People will find me. And
well, Jim, actually... You know, and you've suffered your share of cancellations, but you've got your own channel now, Ustream.com, and I'm told you're doing very well.
Yes, and we've just signed up Chubby Brown as well, just to rub their noses in. And being banned from a lot of theatres makes people will find you. I've just done a tour, Nigel, and I played to 94% business. Chubby Brown will do the same. This is people power. You know all about this, Nigel. Yep. You're a champion, and so is GB News. Let the people decide.
On that note, Jim Davison, I say thank you for coming on, and I'll see you very, very soon, I hope. Thank you. Well, there you are. Jim's right. You know, if theatres don't want the business and people want to hear Roy Chubby Brown, they will find ways to do it. Now, last night we talked about the Trick Awards, yes, the television and radio annual awards, and the fact that my name was there on the list of runners and riders as news presenter of the year. So many of you were trying to vote for me that the system crashed, and it's caused some real anger out there. I've got messages like this. Hello, Mr. Farage. I've attached a copy of my trick voting form supporting you in the news presenter category. As you can see, it was rejected with no explanation. Maybe this is how they rig the voting. In spite of this apparent skullduggery, I wish you well. By the way, I'm sad to miss you on Bournemouth this week. Regards, Peter. So many people getting in touch to say they couldn't vote. So we have been on to Trick, and they assure us that the technology has been updated. They were surprised by the reaction, and they promise us it's now working fine. So those of you that couldn't vote and tried time and time again, they've got their ducks in a row. So please go and, well, if you want to, please go and vote for me. If after this we find people can't vote, well, maybe then I'll be tempted to join those who think they're trying to rig the election against me. Now, in a moment, I'll be joined by somebody who was shot to political stardom in America. She could even be Trump's VP running partner in the election next year. Her name is Carrie Lake. And yet what's interesting is she was a well-known TV presenter for many, many years and thought to be an Obama supporter and a liberal. What we'll do in a moment on Talking Pints, we'll find out who Carrie Lake really is.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, loose women legend Carol McGiffin breaks her silence after reports her views on COVID were behind her axing, spelling the end of 2 decades on the infamous panel show. Has woke ITV made a nasty habit of censoring its biggest stars, or is there more to the story? Carol speaks out exclusively on Dan Wootton tonight, 9 to 11 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm joined by rising Republican star Carrie Lake. Carrie, cheers and welcome
Cheers.
to Talking Pints. I tell you what, you wouldn't be allowed to do this on American television.
I don't
or
think
would
so,
you?
no.
I doubt it.
They should. This is a great idea. This is a great idea.
Well, people sit down, whether it's a cup of tea or a coffee or a drink, and they talk about life, and that's what we try to do. What a weekend to be in London.
How amazing. What an amazing point in history to be able to witness. Hasn't happened in my life, hasn't happened in your life,
no.
Probably most people's lives. And I was so impressed with the beautiful display, the pomp and circumstance, and a little bit of pinching myself, like, am I really watching this happen?
It was incredible. And, to see Charles and Camilla, our king and queen, leaving the Abbey. I was with an historian who said this could have been in the 1200s. It was a sort of medieval feel to it all. Yeah, look, America didn't like George III, and we didn't like George III much either, but hey, what a time to be here. Carrie, it's interesting. You're a very well-known figure in the States, known here to those that follow politics closely. But I just wanted to find out a bit more about you, and it appears, you're a Midwest girl from a very big family and genuinely quite poor.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we didn't think of ourselves as poor back then. My father was a history and government teacher and a football coach. My mom was a nurse. When you have 9 mouths to feed, it almost doesn't matter what you do, you're going to run out of money because that's a lot of mouths to feed. But it was wonderful to grow up in a big family, 8 girls, 1 boy. And we didn't have food in the house. And you're probably thinking of the biofilm that I put out.
Yeah.
But as a child, I never thought, wow, we're poor. Isn't that funny? We probably could have been on government assistance if my dad would have wanted us to, but, you know, we would have had to have been really destitute before he would ever put his hand out and ask the government to help out. Times have changed quite a bit. The government kind of hands out money a lot easier nowadays.
Yeah, well, you've actually gone in America towards a sort of European-style social model.
It's being pushed, yeah.
You know.
But the great thing from growing up in a family like that is the work ethic you learn. You have to chip in, you have to help out, and the riches that I got from that, besides my siblings, is that work ethic, that Midwestern work ethic. 'Cause I'm from the heartland of America, Iowa, which is a big agriculture state. And so I'm just blessed to have that upbringing. Wouldn't change it.
And used to very cold winters.
Cold winters.
Winters that we couldn't even believe here.
I don't know. It was pretty cold here a few days ago.
Well, not quite like Iowa in January, February. So how is it, Carrie, from this background, when's the light bulb moment that you decide television's where you're going to go?
I didn't really decide that I was going to go into television. I was a broadcast journalist for 30 years, and I didn't even decide to do that until halfway through college. And I thought, you know, that would be an interesting job, to be able to tell people's stories, to be able to be in the middle of news when it's happening. And I absolutely...
For those watching on television...
Oh, there I am.
You can see Carrie in action, sorry.
I absolutely loved my career for almost all of that time. And then during COVID, I realized...
Something happened, didn't it? Because, I mean, you were very settled. I mean, you'd been, you know, one of the star presenters for 22 years, the best in Arizona, much warmer, where you moved to. You know, and you were there. But it's interesting, you know, because it's difficult, isn't it, sometimes to know what the TV presenters really, really think. We're having that debate about
Well,
Fox
you're not
News
really supposed to say. If you're just a journalist, you kind of keep your political opinions to yourself. At least you're not to put them out, unless you're a commentator. Like everyone in Britain knows where your political leanings are, so they're not surprised. But when you're doing straight-up news, you're supposed to keep it quiet. But during COVID, I found that an agenda was being pushed, and I did not want to take part in not putting out the full truth. I didn't feel we were...
No, I mean, clearly something happened here. And this is what I want to explore and examine, because, you know, we know that you were a Republican when you were very young, disenchanted by the Iraq War, in fact, by constant wars, and I totally understand that. And yet, but you're seen sort of within the last decade as being quite a liberal figure. You know, there's you, your husband Jeff, you donate money to the Obama campaign. You're allegedly quoted as talking about, you know, maybe the way to deal with the border crisis is to have, you know, amnesties for people who come illegally into America.
Actually, that's not true, but I'll go into that.
But true or not, what I'm saying is this. The perception of you was that you were a fully paid up member of the liberal elite there in Phoenix, Arizona. And something happens. COVID comes along. And it seems to me two very big things.
Two different things happened. Yeah. COVID was the wake-up call I needed to step away from my career, to walk away from a 7-figure contract and say, I don't care how much they pay me, I will not read this anymore. I will not take part in propaganda. So that happened to me before I even got into politics or dreamed of it. But I grew up about an hour away from...
Did you feel that, Carrie, over COVID policy, or more broadly about politics as a whole?
Yeah, politics, it got really old. I mean, you're working in a newsroom in America, and it's 95% liberal.
Yeah.
And they were hell-bent on trying to bring down President Trump. And I saw President Trump as the greatest president I'd ever seen since Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is what caused me at 18 to register and be a Republican. And then somewhere along the way, the Republican Party lost their way as they were starting wars, endless war, another war here, lying about Iraq.
And you thought Obama...
That's why we backed away and said, who's going to...
But you thought Obama could be a sort of bright new hope for America.
I did think that, and I think a lot of people did. You know, 10 million Obama voters switched over and brought us President Trump.
Yeah.
They said, wait a minute, this guy's not what he said he was going to be. Not only did he not bring us together and put some of the racial unrest to bed, he helped stir it up.
But you were sceptical about Trump to begin with, yeah?
No, never. When he came down the escalator, and I've got a book coming out here, and I write about this, I remember people in the newsroom losing their minds over his speech at the bottom of the escalator.
And the funny thing is, prior to that, he'd been an enormously popular figure in America. You know, The Apprentice.
Beloved.
The Apprentice, mega. And this was the guy that took on the big guys, took on the mafia in New York, real estate, glamorous wives. I mean, he was a very popular figure.
Living the American dream, right?
Yeah.
And people loved him. And then, oh my gosh, he decides as an outsider to jump into politics. Much like me, I decided as an outsider, I'm going to jump into politics. Why not? Isn't that how it's supposed to be? And that's when they turn on you. Because you're an outsider.
Well, what you did, of course, was, you know, you went along and spoke at a CPAC event, and which I've been going to for year after year. So suddenly, you decide, and there you are, you're married, 2 children, you got a good job. In fact, you've done it for so long.
A great job.
It's probably relatively easy because you've been doing it for so many years.
Yep.
You know what you're doing, 7-figure income, popular, liked, invited to all the smart parties and all the great places, and you decided to give it all up.
Well, it wasn't really a party. I didn't go to all the smart parties because I was...
You know what I mean.
It was a wonderful life. It afforded me a lifestyle that was wonderful. But I got to live with myself and look at myself in the mirror, and I got to answer to God. And I really was starting to feel that once I felt my job was not just becoming biased, it was becoming immoral. And once you realize something you're doing is immoral and you continue to do it, then it makes you immoral. And I'm not willing to do that. So I stepped away.
Okay, and the evangelical side of you, that also developed during COVID, or was it there before?
I was raised Lutheran and Catholic. My parents were from opposite sides of town. And that was actually, when my mom and dad got married, my mother's father disowned her for several years because she married a Lutheran outside of the Catholic Church. Obviously, she was Catholic. We have 9 kids. So I was always raised with faith, strong faith, and we went to Sunday school every week. But during COVID, when I really felt a need to get back in church, all the churches were shut down for some time. And my church was shut down by appointment only. And I said, we really need to get back in church. I'm just really feeling a drop. That's when we discovered an amazing evangelical church, and it changed our lives. It changed our families' lives.
You talk about God quite a lot.
I think it's really important right now. I think that God is so missing in our society, in our culture. And I'm not going to say it about your culture. I'm not sure if God's missing from your culture. But in America...
The coronation was a profoundly Christian event.
It was beautiful. It really was.
Charles is, you know, he's the head of our established church. Now, we are an increasingly irreligious country, but actually at the centre of our constitutional arrangements, you know, Christianity is there, and it really...
I think people are returning to their faith right now in record numbers.
You think so?
I think so. I mean, I know a lot of people who are getting back into the church and reading the Bible because we're in such difficult times. And oftentimes, you know, when things are going great, we tend to go, okay, hey, thanks, God, that was great, thanks. But when things are going, tough, that's when you're down on your knees praying.
So you've been through this sort of epiphany. You know, religiously, faith-wise, politically, and you start appearing, as I say, at things like CPAC. And then I think it was Turning Point, a Charlie Kirk event with Turning Point, and suddenly Donald Trump spots you and immediately recognises a star. So did that relationship with the two of you just sort of hit it off immediately?
Well, interestingly, I'd interviewed him. I had been granted 2 exclusive interviews with President Trump. I was also granted an interview with President Obama. Which was funny. During the campaign, they took the picture of me and President Obama at the White House and acted like we were prom dates. You know, it was kind of, you know how they'll do that with the media. But I interviewed President Trump twice. I was always fair. I felt it wasn't my job to tear him down. It was my job to treat him fairly. And I never did, by the way, that amnesty thing that you mentioned. That was me as a journalist saying, hey, what are your thoughts on amnesty?
Okay, I mean, Carrie, all I'm saying is the perception of you was that you were very much part of the liberal establishment. Yeah. And suddenly you are where you are. Trump then endorses you.
But he did see me at that Turning Point event. And at the time, I think there were 5 people running, maybe 7 people running. He listed off all of our names, who's running for governor. And when he said my name, the crowd went nuts. It was a beautiful, wonderful moment.
Yeah, and I was there.
I think it was like a minute long.
I was at Mar-a-Lago.